UFC, which stands for Ultimate Fighting Championship, has remained widely popular for decades upon decades, and many would argue it is within the top 5 most popular sports globally. People will pay hundreds upon thousands to attend UFC fights, or even just to watch them on the television. If you are a UFC fan, then you probably love to watch a good knockout, especially when it's the guy you don't want to win. Over the years, there have been some insane knockouts that don't seem to happen like your run-of-the-mill KO. In today's video, we are going to cover some of the craziest and most memorable knockouts in UFC history. Quinton Jackson versus Chuck Liddell. Quinton Jackson, also known as Rampage, is an American mixed martial artist, former professional wrestler, and actor. He is most well known for his time in MMA, but has been partaking in UFC fights over the years. Chuck Liddell is a retired MMA artist and former UFC light heavyweight champion. Liddell is definitely a crowd favorite and favored within the UFC world in comparison to Jackson, making this KO all the more iconic. In 2003, Rampage defeated one of the most dominant light heavyweight champions of all time, Chuck Liddell. Many were wondering if he could do it again. Then came 2007, and the pair were set to fight again. At the time, Liddell had gone 7-0 since his first loss to Rampage. Rampage was ranking 26-6 wins to losses. When the first fight began, Rampage wasted no time in knocking Liddell out. It literally happened within the first minute of the first round, an iconic UFC moment. Vitor, Belfort, and Wanderlei Silva. This knockout took place in just 44 seconds. 21-year-old Vitor Belfort, a Brazilian UFC fighter, made his mark and created a name for himself with this early career-defining win. Belfort was up against Wanderlei Silva, otherwise known as the Axe Murderer or Chocoro Loco, who was significantly older and more experienced at the time of his knockout. The fight began, and within 44 seconds, Silva had been knocked out instantly, meaning the win went to Belfort. This was especially memorable as Silva was known as a ferocious fighter whom no one expected to lose. James Irvine versus Terry Martin. This video wouldn't be complete if we didn't mention a flying knee knockout, arguably one of the most interesting methods leading to a KO at the UFC 54. James Irvine, a now retired American professional MMA fighter who is sometimes referred to as the Sandman, was up against Terry Martin, who is also a retired American professional MMA fighter who has also competed for the UFC, otherwise known as Dangerous. In 2005, the pair were set to fight. They were waved into their second round by the referee, and instead of meeting Martin in the middle with his fist, Irvine came flying in with his knee, instantly knocking Martin out and winning the fight. This knockout is ranked number 97 in UFC's top knockouts of all time. Anderson Silva versus Rich Franklin. Another memorable knockout moment within UFC history is the match against Anderson Silva, an American-Brazilian MMA fighter who is also a former UFC middleweight champion and holds the record for the longest title reign in UFC history, and Rich Franklin, a now retired American MMA professional while also being a former middleweight UFC champion. This was set to be an iconic match against two extremely talented fighters with similar rankings and titles. Franklin was known as one of the greatest middleweight champions, and Silva was known for his first round knockout and defeat over Chris Leben. After Silva and Franklin had been fighting for a while, both trying to feel out their opponent and their tactics, Silva got Franklin up against the cage into a Muay Thai clinch when he began to hit him repeatedly with his knee, breaking Franklin's nose in the process. This ultimately led to a win for Silva and an iconic knockout many UFC fans will never forget. BJ Penn versus Cole Uno. BJ Penn is an American MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter. Cole Uno is a Japanese MMA fighter and professional wrestler. In 2001, the pair went head-to-head, with Penn being only 23 years old at the time. This was the second of 2 consecutive knockout wins for the UFC lightweight BJ Penn. Being only the third fight in his career, Penn was set to fight Uno. They only made it 11 seconds into round 1 when Penn had completely knocked out Uno, meaning Penn won the match pretty much as soon as it began. Definitely a career-defining moment for the young fighter. Yves Edwards versus Josh Thompson. This memorable knockout took place at UFC 49 against Yves Edwards, a Bohemian MMA fighter, and Josh Thompson, an American MMA fighter who is now retired and works as an MMA podcaster and commentator. This legendary fight took place in August of 2004, when both fighters were in their prime. Both fighters were extremely talented. However, Edwards stole the show that night, premiering a new move he had learned, a spinning back kick that ultimately knocked out Thompson, winning the match for Edwards. Anderson Silva versus Vitor Belfort. Anderson Silva had already been mentioned on this list. However, he had to make another appearance moments, as this knockout was too unforgettable not to mention. Silva, an American-Brazilian MMA fighter, was up against Vitor Belfort, a Brazilian MMA fighter, both of whom competed in UFC regularly. On February the 6th, the pair were set to fight. This was anticipated to be one of Silva's toughest fights to date. Belfort has previously come off a 3-fight knockout streak over Matt Lindland, Terry Martin, and Rich Franklin. Not long after the fight had begun, Silva discovered one of the most damaging, brutal front kicks you will see in the UFC history. This instantly knocked out Belfort and put him out of the game for a while. This knockout was and always will be legendary. Lyoto Machida versus Rashad Evans. Now this knockout is especially unforgettable, as this was the first time two undefeated fighters were going to meet face to face. Lyoto Machida, a Brazilian MMA fighter, was 14-0 going into this light heavyweight title match with Rashad Evans, an American MMA fighter who was 13-0 in wins to losses. You already know this fight was highly anticipated by UFC fans worldwide. However, the fight wouldn't last long, with Evans taking an insane beating by Machida. In the first round, Machida dropped Evans so hard that he wasn't able to finish the round. Once again, he dropped Evans significantly harder in the second round, ultimately knocking him out and winning the fight. The reason Evans took such a beating, even though he was an incredibly skilled fighter, is because Machida established a fighting style nobody could read. Not even Evans, meaning he had no idea how to combat or guess what Machida would do next. Phil Barone versus Dave Mene. This legendary fight between Phil Barone and Dave Mene took place back in September of 2002. Not only is this fight memorable for the knockout that happened, but also the post-fight quotes that came from Barone. You are probably seeing a running theme here. All of these knockouts happen relatively early on in the fight, typically in the first round. This fight was no exception. Within seconds of fighting, Barone got Mene up against the cage and delivered 5 hard punches that put his opponent out in seconds. After defeating the former champion, Barone started jumping on the side of the cage and screaming into the audience, "I'm the best ever," over and over again, before being announced the official winner of the match. Tank Abbott versus John Matua. Tank Abbott was a crowd favorite and will always be known as a fearless and strong fighter due to his countless knockouts and fearless fighting spirit. At the UFC 6 Clash of the Titans back in July 1995, Abbott and Josh Matua were set to fight. This was Abbott's second fight at UFC 6, Clash of the Titans, and all eyes were on him. It took less than 20 seconds for Abbott to brutally knock out John Matua in what many have described as the most disturbing knockouts ever witnessed inside of the octagon. Scott Smith versus Pete Sell. This iconic fight took place at the Ultimate Fighter 4 finale. Scott Smith, an American MMA professional, was up against Pete Sell, a fellow American MMA fighter. Smith was known for being tough and having hands of steel, and Sell was known for being a very hard puncher. Fans were definitely eager to see who would come out on top, but ultimately Smith would prove to be victorious. For a brief moment, it seemed like Sell would come out on top after delivering a nasty body shot to Smith, who seemed visibly hurt as he crunched over. Sell went in for the finishing blow, but got his with a strong punch that he never even saw coming, leading to Smith knocking out Sell in one blow. Gabriel Gonzaga versus Miro Crow Cop. This fight was supposed to put Miro Crow Cop into the heavyweight championship against Couture, as everyone expected Crow Cop to come out victorious against Gabriel Gonzaga. However, Gonzaga was quick to deliver a brutal head kick to Crow Cop, instantly knocking him out. This ultimately meant Gonzaga would be heading to the heavyweight championship, something many didn't see coming. Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping. At the UFC 100, Dan Henderson and Michael Bisping were set to fight. Before the fight began, Bisping continued to trash talk his opponent, implying that he was definitely going to win. Henderson refrained from responding until they took to the ring. Henderson showed early on that this opponent wasn't going to be much of a challenge, knocking him out fairly early on in the match. In the first round, Henderson significantly hurt Bisping, but it was in the second round that Henderson delivered a huge blow that put Bisping to sleep, instantly crowning Henderson as the winner. Chuck Liddell versus Randy Couture. UFC 52 was set to be an iconic match to see who would get the light heavyweight title. Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture had an ongoing history, constantly going back and forth. Liddell was eager to win back the title he had lost to Couture only 2 years earlier. Once the match began, it only took 2 minutes for Liddell to throw his trademark right hand on Couture's chin, instantly putting the two-time UFC champion to sleep. Liddell would also go on to knock Couture out for a second time at UFC 57. However, it was at UFC 52 that Liddell threw his biggest knockout to date. And there you have it, some of the biggest knockouts and most memorable moments in UFC history. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe so you never miss any of our videos.